That documentation itself will be considered as good evidence. And so now instead of this hierarchical evidence that experience is more but at the lowest end of the evidence and RCT is at the highest end of the evidence, now people are saying that evidence should be looked into a circular manner. So everything is important in a circular manner. Another important sentence I wanted to tell you here is absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So in traditional medicine, just because you are not able to give some evidence, proof of that evidence doesn't mean evidence is not there. This is conceived very wrongly by modern scientists, saying that you don't have evidence. How do you really study these kinds of evidence? For example, how do you measure pranic energy? How do you measure chi? There are methods in modern medicine? No, there are not. There are no methods in modern medicine. So, but just because you are not able to measure doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And for that purpose, just to highlight this point, this interesting article from British Medical Journal. Are you going to stop using parachute because there is no double-blind placebo-controlled trial to prove that parachute can save your life? Or if somebody wants to do double-blind clinical trials and controlled trial on parachute, will anybody volunteer for that? This is the question which is exactly similar to traditional medicine. That parachutes we know by experience, we know. We don't need anybody to tell us, certify that if you use parachute when you are falling down from height, your life will be saved. We don't need RCTs for that purpose. So, we need a balance between scientific evidence and traditional experience. Evidence-based medicine and experience-based medicine. So I have added in my book this E. Evidence-based medicine is normally short term as EB, evidence-based medicine, EB. It should be E square BM, and that second E should come from experience. We cannot undermine the experience that comes from traditional medicine. This is the chart which we developed, which is called a systems Ayurveda chart. And you can actually, center can develop such kind of a chart for Tibetan medicine. Now this chart gives 320 knowledge points drawn from Charak Sushruta, starting from very esoteric concepts of Loka and Purusha, which is the fundamental concept of Ayurveda, to Panchamahabhuta theory, to Tridosha theory, to Guna, Rasa, Virya, Agni. All these concepts are put using what we call as logical framework. There is a movement in the world started by a famous journal called Nature Biotechnology. Nature is the top scientific journal. They also publish Nature Biotechnology. They say that complex of the complex things can be best represented using graphical notations. And these are the graphical notations which we created. All those 220 knowledge points we have connected to each other in a forward and backward linkages with logical flow and with color codes. Starting from Lok Purush to Ashtanga Ayurveda. How everything is relation. The relationships are not one-to-one, but one-to-many. And not only unidirectional, but multi-directional. So I would end this talk with this message that health is something which is important to us. Medicine is important when health is lost. But primary concern should be maintaining health, and maintaining health has been strength of traditional knowledge systems. Swastha Vrutta. Protecting health is considered as first important criteria in traditional medical systems. So, first we should really maintain health, and if for some reason health is lost, medicine should always be there. But medicine focus, what today we are facing in the world, is not good for humanity, and it should be brought back to the health. Focus should be brought back to the health, and that job can be best done by the traditional community. So with this, the first part in which I have also covered policy part, because as I told you, the presentations are going to be very mixed presentations, and I tried to put some points before you. Not that all the points will be correct, some of the points you may challenge, and the next few minutes we can spend on discussions. Thank you. I think that yesterday I had brief talk, and I think in today's world, just material medicine is not enough. You need medicine for mind also, and that medicine for mind is meditation. And so I thought of this, putting this, that paying my respect and tribute to Tibetan medicine. I think this system can give the world a unique combination of medicine and meditation together, because you have strengths in both. Unfortunately, in Ayurveda and yoga, they have gone on separate routes. Actually, they should be integrated with each other. But hardly Ayurvedic practitioners will use yoga, or yoga practitioners will use Ayurveda. The mind and body, unless we consider them together, the healing is not complete, and therefore I think meditation is one of the very important. I may give one example of that. You may know meditation strengths from his original literature, but one of the top modern neuroscientists, her name was Candace Pert. Candace Pert expired last year, and Candace Pert was actually nominated for Nobel. She could have got Nobel Prize for her work on opioid receptors. She worked on opioid receptors. Very, very outstanding. She was director of National Institutes of Health, and she wrote a book, and that book is called, name of the book is very interesting, Molecules of Emotions. She is basically molecular biology, genetics, modern science, neurology person. So why I am telling all this background to you about her is, what statement I am going to tell you is coming from a person who has reached to the top level in science. And one of the statements she made, she was by the way influenced by Deepak Chopra and this book, and also to her son actually is a follower of Buddhist tradition, who is presently, her son has established a foundation in the US, and that foundation's name is Bridging Science and Spirituality. So you will understand that at the top level, not at the mediocre scientist level. Mediocre scientist level will always humiliate science traditions. They will. We have to live with them. But at the top level, this understanding is coming in a very, very strong way. At the top level. What Candace Pert said in one of her lectures was, she said that one day will come in medicine when you will not need any external medicine to be taken in. You will meditate and you will order, release, and your body will release that chemical which will relieve you from your disease. Now look at the profoundness of what she is telling. Today we know we take drug externally. Why we take drug externally? Because we want to do some changes in our biochemicals. Ultimately, drug changes your biochemical system. If that biochemical system can be changed to something else than drug, still you are going to get benefit. So drug itself is not important. What changes within is important. And for those changes within, top of the top neuroscientist is telling you that you may not need external. You have that inner strength. We have undermined strength of the mind. all these years. And I don't think any other culture, any other tradition than Tibetan tradition understands that today. And so we have great hope to learn all this, to integrate it truly with medicine and meditation for evolving towards medicine. Center should really look into that and see how future path can go beyond just clinical practice using Tibetan medicine, but you have a potential to give a larger vision to the world for evolving future medicine. Yes.
According to you, health and medicine defense and definition of the WHO is merely not having without disease is not what's the healthy person? Let's say if I don't have any disease, am I healthy or not? So I'm going to do something disease.
I will say that we don't understand health. We don't know health. We don't know health. Because modern science has not studied health. We have not studied health. There has been no effort gone to understand health. But health is expressed best by the term in Sanskrit. I am sure there must be some term in Pali also. Swasthya is the term for health. Because health is otherwise translated as arogya. But arogya is connected to roga. Again you are saying arogya, absence of roga. That is not the right definition of health. Swasthya, swasth. And Buddha has said what it is. That is health. There is nothing different than health. Swasth, being stable within ourselves. That's swasth. That is it. That is the ultimate level of health.
Yeah, but anybody can be a healthy person or not. Because sometimes we can be a without disease, but we normally spirituality perfect, something like this. So anybody can be a healthy person.
See, when we ask this question, and we do this exercise with our students, because we teach our students through such question answers and not through techniques. So we ask them on the first day, how many of you think that you are healthy? Some of them raise hands, but majority of them don't raise hands. Sometimes some of them raise hands, and then we ask them what makes you think you are healthy. And then when you go on probing, ultimately they get convinced that they are not healthy. So there is nothing like ultimate health or complete health. That is why that complete term there, we don't agree. Because if you are swasthya, you are beyond everything. You are liberated. You don't need health. Is that kind of a state, which is kind of a spiritual notion. In reality, you may not get a total health or complete health. There will be always some or the other. That is human life. Why human? That is life. Yes.
Morning. I'd like to ask two questions. So what kind of obstructions that you see in the conservation of purity of Tibetan medicine? And what kind of initiatives that we have to take from personal level to preserve the purity of Tibetan medicine, and so we can also survive in this today's modern world, like commercial world?
A very good question. One of the major risks of preserving, in the process of preserving purity, is a very, very strong force of modern science which is coming up. And because there is a disconnect between the tradition and science, traditional practitioners always feel that there is something inferior to modern doctors, which they are not, because the levels of strength are different. Modern practitioner may be able to cure headache by giving aspirin, or they may be able to perform some surgery to remove blocks in your arteries. They are doing it wonderfully well, there is no problem. But they are not able to manage many diseases, many lifestyle conditions, many chronic conditions, many mind conditions. They are not able to manage. That is your strength. So first of all, I personally tell my Ayurvedic colleagues, and the same is true to other traditions also, that we should stop thinking that we can do everything. Because there are limitations of every path. Modern medicine has also limitations, so we also have limitations. Ayurveda was evolved maybe 400 years BC or 200 years BC, we don't know. History also we don't know correctly. And after that, because of so many invasions, because of so many assaults, our efforts have gone only in preventing. And so Ayurveda or Sanskrit, Pali-like languages have merely become languages. Earlier they were knowledge languages. So that knowledge part today has become kind of a ritualistic. We have to get out of that. And we have to really take our strengths to modern medicine and test that. Some may come true, some may not come true. But that is the law of science. Everything you cannot. Example I will give you. There is a concept in Tibetan medicine also that you can classify population of people in 3 different categories, like Vatpika. You may be giving different names, but Vatpika. Earlier we used to make fun of that. That how can you say that Vatpika, where is Vatpika, show me Vatpika. So these are just notions, ideas. We don't believe it in science. But these are not just notions. And that's why I said, separating philosophy and science, we made a mistake. We hypothesized. This actually we did in our laboratory, which I did not show because that was the research part. But since you asked this question, what can be done or what should be done, this as an example I am giving. So we hypothesized that Vat Pitta has genetic connotation. Because you are able to classify human population into 3 different categories, and based on that category you are designing your medicine. The person may come with same symptoms, but if that prakriti is different, you will give them different medicine. Why? Because you think that they are different. Today, modern world has realized it 15 years ago, and a new discipline emerged called pharmacogenomics. A simple question was asked: when all of us look different, think different, respond differently to different things, when I am talking to you, each one of you is thinking differently. So this is a variation. We cannot equate everybody together. So how can we believe that one tablet of aspirin will give similar effect to everybody? All these years, modern medicine was believing this, that one drug will have same effect, and that's how RCTs were designed. We challenged that. We said that if all of us are different, medicine cannot be same in all of us. Modern medicine has now shown that even aspirin, 500 milligrams of aspirin may give relief from headache to you, may give acidity to her, may give ulcers to him. Aspirin, one tablet can have different actions, and not just aspirin, every medicine. So we say that if you are able to give aspirin based on your prakriti, so aspirin dose for pitta prakriti will be different than kapha prakriti and then vata prakriti. Then suddenly situation will change. So we hypothesize, and we want, because our group is working on rheumatoid arthritis, and in modern medicine, relationship of rheumatoid arthritis and a gene called HLA, human leukocyte antigen, HLA typing you may have read. That relationship is known. So what we did, in a random study, in a blind study, we took patients of rheumatoid arthritis, we distributed them, we told by that, you classify them into 3 categories. What pitta? We don't know, we don't want to know also. And then we took their blood. Again, scientists were blind, we did not know what is what. And then we analyzed their DNA. And we showed that HLA gene, every gene shows polymorphism. These are technical terms, but forget about it. There are 12 different types of variants of that gene, for example. And we showed that those variant distribution in Vata was different, in Kapha was different, in Pitta was different. This in 2005, we published in an international journal and presented it at Cold Spring Harbor Symposium on Pharmacogenomics. For the first time, a solid scientific support was given to traditional analysis. And now, Government of India has given 100 crore grant, and the new discipline has emerged, which is called as Ayurvedic genomics. So, from one simple looking concept from traditional knowledge could lead to an entirely new direction in medicine. And there are several such gems available with us, with you. Now, the question is, those should be tested. But when you test, most importantly, you must adopt right methodology. If you don't, then you will come to wrong results. And for that wrong result part, I will give you another example, again based on our work. This is my PhD work, and what I am telling you, which opened my eyes. My PhD was on black nut, Semicarpus anacardium. I don't know whether you get it in this area, but it's of the same family of cashew nut. And the oil that comes out of that nut is very corrosive. And that oil actually is used in industry for bonding this plywood, phenol bonding. But in Indian medicine, that is considered the Ardhavaidya. Name of Ballatan is a Sanskrit name, they call it an Ardhavaidya. Half of the diseases you can treat with that. They consider that as one of the greatest rasayana. So, my job was to do its anti-cancer activity. And I was working at Happy Institute, which is one of the top research institutes. We were separating by doing extraction, solvent extraction using HPLC, HPTLC. Crude extract, as traditional practitioners used to use, was extremely active in cancer. 70% ILS. ILS meaning increase in lifespan. That is how we measure anti-cancer activity in animals. In animals, we